So I put it on blocks in the VINwiki warehouse. Two years ago, the CL55 we used for the Cannonball record broke. The suspension failed and just started to leak fluid everywhere, and the consensus was that it was this valve block that regulates the pressure to the suspension to the shocks when the car's parked. And I was just kind of over it at that point. I'd driven the car about 10,000 miles since we'd finished the record and had a lot of fun with it, but I knew it was going to be an ongoing expensive car to keep running, and in addition to that, I knew it needed tires and brakes and other things, and I was just like, let's just park it. So I put it on blocks in the VINwiki warehouse, and it sat there for about 2 years. But about 4 weeks ago, I decided, you know what, it's time to get this thing running. I was worried about the gas and everything else that goes with letting a car sit for that long. So I called the guys at RBM North and got the car shipped over to them, and they were very happy to see it again. They'd actually done the prep work prior to our departure. And so, in fact, it was just a hose, which was still about $1,200. So we did that, went through the electrical system, put new tires on, and just generally serviced the car and got it back up for about $3,000, which was nice. I mean, the cars are catastrophically expensive to maintain, and they've cost me more of that in the S-Class than every Italian sports car I've ever owned. But it's sort of a labor of love, and it's what makes them great for Cannonball. And Cannonball draws on a lot of different ideas and variables that you've got to solve for, but what car do I drive is the most fun question to discuss. And I really started looking into this about 03, 04 when we started to just see this explosion of production of interesting cars. You know, prior to that, we really had the M5, the 911 Turbo, and the 360 Modena. Other than that, there weren't a whole lot of options. Now, obviously, you know, there's dozens and dozens of interesting sports cars to consider to buy, but that was not always the case. And the variety that we love today is really due to the success that manufacturers had back in 03 and 04 with selling new cars. We had Maserati back to the US market, Bentley was coming strong with the Continental GT, the Gallardo was new, Ferrari brought the Enzo out, the SLR was announced. Obviously, we had all the new supercharged AMG cars making 500 or so horsepower, and just tons and tons of awesome new cars. And it was an exciting time to love cars, and it was an exciting time to, at least in my head, shop for a Cannonball car. The first car I ever bought to do Cannonball in, though, was a 2003 white S55 AMG that I bought in 08. And it was on Craigslist here in Atlanta, and I think they were asking $19,900 for it, which was dirt cheap. And it was a low option car with a little bit of paint work, but it was perfect for this type of project. And so I called the guy, and he was not much of a shrewd negotiator. In fact, he almost immediately told me that CarMax had offered him $16,000 and that he wouldn't be able to take any less than that. So I said, so if I bring you $16,001, I can have it? And he kind of sighed and said, well, I guess. So I went on right down there with a check and got the car. And I loved it. Forrest and I immediately set out, you know, spraying Epilin all over everything and doing all that we could to, you know, make it a stealthy Cannonball car on the budget that we had back then. But 3 months later, somebody turned right into it and totaled the car. And their insurance wasn't much to negotiate with, so I ended up getting $27,500 for the totaled car, and then bought a much nicer one for $23,000. And drove it for a little while, but I was so busy at the dealership, and it kind of put Cannonball on the back burner. And about the same time, I bought the prostitute Gallardo, and I was daily driving that, so I was kind of neglecting the S-Class, and I just decided, you know what, I'll sell it, and I'll buy it whenever I'm a little bit more immediately ready to do something with the record. So drove that for a little while and bought a few other cars, and then finally in 2012 I said, you know what, it's time. And that same week I'd bought a Murcielago, my first one, an orange Roadster, and so that kind of ruled out the more aspirational ideas of a Cannonball car, because obviously in that span of time a lot of new stuff was out. But I couldn't think of anything that really made more sense on paper than the CL55, because you know it's under the radar and subtle enough that it's not going to get the cops called on you just for existing. It's plenty fast, everything you need it to be, and it can really handle the payload, because not only do you have the 3 people in the car, some of which are pretty tall, but you've got all the electronics that really overload the electrical system, and you got the fuel. And different than Alex Roy and Dave Maher and Dennis Collins and Richard Rawlings, I wanted to have a lot more gasoline on board so I could only stop 3 times. So I did 2 additional 22-gallon cells, which was about 400 pounds of fuel. And I needed the car to stay level, so the hydraulic suspension system, the ABC, is perfect. But it's the Achilles heel of long-term maintenance. And so now I'm sort of plagued with keeping it running, but but it's worth it because obviously it did what I needed it to do at the time. But over the years, I looked at a lot of different cars. I had looked at the Aston Martin Rapide and the Lotus Evora, in fact, because we represented both of them new, and I thought, hey, maybe I'll get some manufacturer support for doing this in one of the home team cars. But Aston Works was going to be pretty expensive to outfit a car, and the Lotus, even though it was the only car that could go over 150 miles an hour, but also got 30 miles per gallon on the highway, really didn't allow us to have a third person, and the fuel packaging was going to be an issue, so I just said let's not worry about that. I got pretty close to buying a Continental GT a couple of times and a Panamera Turbo, and looked at, even another Ferrari 612 and a bunch of interesting cars, but I kept coming back to the AMG cars. They just made a lot of sense, and it was the right amount of money for me to spend at the time on something to pursue this with, and it checked all the boxes. So I started looking, and I said I'll buy the next good S55 or CL55 I find, and I found this granite gray car on Craigslist here in Atlanta for $17,500 and bought it. And I loved it because it was kind of an ambiguous color. Was it green, blue, silver, gray? Who could say? For all the 911 calls, I'm sure that did come in handy. In fact, I've never seen another one in exactly that spec until about 5 weeks ago. One popped up in Colorado on Auto Trader for 26 grand with 35,000 miles. And I want to buy the thing because I know I'm going to be maintaining this one for forever. But I hate the idea of having to maintain it and keep it running while I have to scavenge parts off of it to refresh mine. So I haven't decided yet. I'm looking forward to talking to my kids and their kids about this car and about Cannonball, and I hope the conversation continues to happen of what makes the very best Cannonball car. I've mentioned that a Bentley Super Sports or a newer 65 car would be terrific, and I stand by that. The diesel idea comes up for fuel range, but they don't really make great enough power to sustain the high speeds at that type of economy for all that long. I love the idea of doing it in something more exotic, in a GT4 Lusso or an Aventador, but in reality, they don't really gain you that much, and they definitely gain you a lot in the expense department and the depreciation department. So feel free to comment about what you think would make the best car, and I'll be happy to chime in as well.
Are you looking to buy your dream car? Premier Financial Services offers the flexibility of financing with the tax benefits of leasing. The PFS Simple Lease offers quick approvals and easy termination when you are ready for the next car. Visit our website and follow us for more.